The Avodah, which literally means work or service, was the centerpiece of Judaism's Yom Kippur. It's the only Yom Kippur there is. Through the time of the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, it was a completely different world. If you don't learn anything about Yom Kippur, you're going to come away with an understanding that we're living a Judaism that's very, very different. You might call it survival Judaism. The rabbis at Yavne, after the destruction of the temple, had to figure out, what are we going to do now? So much centers around the Beit HaMikdash, and we don't have a Beit HaMikdash. Now, they did not know it would be a 2,000-year exile. The first exile was 70 years, 7-0, from Babylonia till we came back and rebuilt the Beit HaMikdash. But even so, 70 years that's a lifetime. And so at the yeshiva of Yavne, they created a Judaism for the exile. And that's the Judaism we live, in which there's davening. There was always davening from Anshe Knesset Agdola when we were exiled into Babylonia, and also did not have a Beit HaMikdash. And so the rabbis then created the brachot and the Amidah Shmona Esrei for morning, afternoon, night, and created that you're going to daven 3 times a day, face Jerusalem. And so now they had to figure out, what are we going to do? So the Judaism you know, and I know, is, oh, Yom Kippur's coming. We'll be going to shul. There's going to be a chazan. The chazan, I leave it to each, beauty is in the ears of the beholder. Some love that, but the chazan really is like an Italian opera singer. And there are some who have a problem with that. Some believe that creates a feeling of greater awe, especially if you get to know the chazan personally. I don't mean amazingly personally, but if he's not just someone up the front of the shul and you're in the back and you only know he's the chazan, but if you actually meet him for 5 minutes and you find that he personally is a humble man, like the Rabbi Erblich, the chazan Erblich that we've had, and the other chazan Erblich, his son, who's been at the other Irvine shul, and there's so many chazanim who are so humble. That changes everything. Now you know he's not a performer. Now you know he feels, and he correctly feels, he has a gift from God to sing, and he wants to and lovingly sings to God with the gift God gave him to serve God and bring, just as I try with whatever ability I might have, to bring people closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu by the way I teach and what I teach and how I teach. So, and it's not out of arrogance that I'm just trying to be some important person. I know my place. When you meet a chazan who's humble, and most of those I've ever met it could be very inspiring. But then there are some people that just don't go for that. And then there are a lot of these Reformed conservative temples where they're basically just hiring singers who don't believe in God, or at least they don't observe Shabbat, they don't observe kosher, and now they're standing on Yom Kippur going, for the sin we've sinned, when they should be sitting in the back row in an Orthodox shul. So the Yom Kippur we know is you go to shul, there's a chazan, sings like an opera singer, and I don't mean it sarcastically, but that's how if you've ever been to an opera, I don't care if we're talking about Tosca, Rigoletto, whatever it might be, that's how they sing. And much of that singing actually comes from the Middle Ages Italian operas. That's where it came from. That's where they developed that kind of style of singing. And it stuck. So that's the Judaism we know. You get a machzor, you get a book. It's got about 1,000 pages, and they announce the page, and you pray. And of course, you fast, and you don't wear leather shoes, and you don't wash, and you don't anoint, and you don't eat, and you don't drink, and you don't have intimate relations. Okay. At the time of the Beit HaMikdash, it was very, very different. Jews came from all over the world, not to go to the beautiful hotel in the great synagogue of Jerusalem per se, but to be at the Beit HaMikdash the way, and I don't say it sarcastically, and I don't say it disrespectfully, but like the best example I can give you is Catholics on Easter going to the Vatican and standing in St. Peter's Square, hoping to get a glimpse of the Pope as he makes a speech. And in the same way, Jews hope to get a glimpse of the Kohen Gadol, the High Kohen. And that was the spirituality. And if it doesn't grab you to watch animals being slaughtered, I mean, not a million of them, but a few, that might not seem spiritual now, but that was awfully, awfully spiritual 2,000 years ago. Because what is spiritual is what you are culturally taught. I mean it. If you think it's not spiritual when you're going to see for someone to slaughter an animal, first of all, if you think it's not humane, I hope you don't eat meat, because that's how they get it. That's how they get the meat. I know there's about Impossible Burgers and Morningstar Farms. That's how you get meat, by slaughtering an animal. And it's not pretty. And there's even an expression that, it's not, don't look at how they make the sausage, kosher. But that's not pretty. But before we stop and say, gee, I don't know, that's not the Judaism I'm used to. Of course not, because we're not used to a Beit HaMikdash Judaism. But let me ask you the other way around. Can you imagine if the Jews of 2,000 years ago suddenly found themselves today in your shul, wherever that shul is, so listening to your chad? Can you imagine what they would be feeling? They would be feeling and talking to each other. This is Judaism. This is the awe of Yom Kippur. A bunch of Jews going into a building and listening to an opera singer. What is this? Where's the Kohen Gadol? Where's the korban? Where's the sacrifice? They're reading from a book, for goodness sakes. We never read from a book. We look at the Kohen Gadol. We hear the prayers. We prostrate on the ground. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchut Toli Olam Va'ed. We don't have to look at a book. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchut. Whoever heard of it? Well, when are they reading a book? You're at services. Why are they reading a book when they should be opening their hearts to God? So before we simply walk away feeling that's not spiritual, we're spiritual, it's a cultural thing. And at the time when Mashiach comes, they're going to have a Judaism for all of us. And that's what we say, when we say to may God, may you come, and may we see you return to Yerushalayim. We ask, Hashem Elokeinu b'Amcha Yisrael u'v'tefilatam. Oh God, please desire your nation Israel and their prayers. V'tefilatam v'hasheva ta'avodah l'dverbeitecha. And please return the service to your Beit HaMikdash. We're asking God to bring sacrifices back. V'hasheva ta'avodah l'dverbeitecha v'ishei Yisrael u'tefilatam. Ishei, in that sense, is Eish, shell. And the fires of, Eish, fire, Ishei, fires of, the Ishei Israel, and may the fires of Israel, namely the sacrifices, B'tfilatam, and their prayers, Ishei Israel B'tfilatam Tekabel B'ratzon, B'avat Tekabel B'ratzon, with happiness, with love, please accept all of it with your desire. So that's what we pray for. That's what we pray for every time in Musaf. Shabbat Musaf, Rosh Chodesh Musaf. So I do this as an intro, because this is the real, when they sing, give me that old-time religion, give me that old-time religion, give me that old-time religion, it's good enough. That's the old-time religion. That's the Judaism of Moshe Rabbeinu at Mount Sinai, meaning that's the Torah. And what we do is like Rabbinic Judaism, which for the anti-Orthodox, that's what they shrug away. Rabbinic Judaism. Yeah, but it's also Rabbinic Judaism to use an etrog, a citron, instead of a lemon. It's also Rabbinic Judaism to slaughter an animal kosher. It's Rabbinic Judaism to treat chicken as meat, not as parv. It's Rabbinic Judaism to wait 6 hours, sort of, after meat before you, or 3 hours or 1 hour, depending on the custom. I mean, Hanukkah is Rabbinic Judaism. Purim is Rabbinic Judaism, most of what we do. So it's not so simple. That's Judaism. I ask you to open your hearts. I don't really have to. That's why you're here. Of course, that's why you're here. Shouldn't say that. It's what you say when you're a rabbi on a sermon in shul, but I hope I give you something that you haven't had before and that will enrich your understanding of Yom Kippur. And the last class, we went through Unetaneh Tokef. And in going through Unetaneh Tokef, I just obviously cannot do that again because it was an entire hour or so. So I'm going to do it incredibly quickly without all the depth of last class, setting it up for what I want to add that we did not have a chance to learn. Here we go. Unetaneh Tokef is in the repetition of the Amidah before the Kedusha. Unetaneh Tokef Kedushat Hayom. So let us set aside and understand the power of the holiness of this day. Ki hu no rava ayom, because it is a day of awe, A-W-E, and fear. Uvoti naseh malchutecha v'ikon b'chesed kisecha. And on this day, your kingship, your throne shall be elevated, and your throne, your chair, shall be established in kindness. V'teshev alav ve'emet, and you'll sit on it, your throne, in truth. Emet ki atahu dayanu mochiach v'yodeh v'ed. It is true, you are the judge, and you look at the evidence, and you know and you witness. V'chotev v'chotem v'sofer umuneh. And you write in the book, and you seal what you write. And you are the scribe, and you count everything. V'tizkor kol hanishkachot. You don't forget anything. You remember everything. As people are there before you, if they've had a bad year in terms of their deeds, you remember, maybe they don't. You remember the righteousness of their youth. If they've had a good year in their deeds, you also remember the past. One can atone for the past, but one cannot erase from God's memory the past. That's what we recited on Rosh Hashanah, Zichronot. He remembers everything. He remembers context of everything. V'tiftach et sefer haZichronot, and you open the book of memories. Ume'elav yikareh, and as we are there praying to you, you're reading from the book. V'chotam yad kol adam bo, and for every deed in the book relating to every person, they figuratively have signed. I gave the example of human resources calling someone in to be told there is a problem with the work they're doing, and they're being instructed that they're at the risk of being fired if this happens again, and they're given a piece of paper that summarizes what they've been told, and they're told to sign it. Every time we do something good or bad, we sign the book, and he has a record of everything, and we've acknowledged it, whether we realize or not that we signed it. And on this day, in heaven, a remarkably loud shofar is blowing alongside the most thin and barely audible whisper. And angels, the angels of heaven, your assistants, are in a frenzy. They themselves perceive the awesome moment and themselves are terrified. Ra'adah, they're trembling, the angels. Imagine what we people should be doing. V'yomru hinei yom hadin, they're saying, today is judgment day. Lifkodot tzvar marom badin, today is the day God is assigning judgment. Ki lo yisku be'enecha badin. No one's getting off without judgment. It might be a good judgment. It might be not guilty. But no one is getting a pass. No one's negotiating a plea agreement that they're not going to be judged. The entire world, not only Jews, on this day go before you like sheep before a shepherd. As a shepherd has all of his sheep going by, counting them one, making sure he hasn't lost any. That's how you have them all pass by, all the humans, and count them. You take an account of the soul and life of every living being. And you establish how long a lifetime will each creature have. Animals also. V'tichtovet gezar dinam, and you inscribe the decree of their judgment. On Rosh Hashanah, the decree is inscribed. And on Yom Kippur, it is sealed. An eraser no longer can take it off the page. Rosh Hashanah yikatevun of Yom Kippur yichatemun. By the way to wish somebody going into Yom Kippur, the best way, people always ask me, they say it sounds awkward to say have a good fast or have an easy fast. I mean, sure you want an easy fast, but the idea of a fast is, it's not about having an easy fast. The most proper greeting, have a meaningful fast. Have a meaningful fast. It is decided on Yom Kippur, kama ya'avrum v'kama yibareyun. Kama is not about the individual. Kama is a group word. How many versus me, which is an individual, WHO, who. So how many in the world will be passing? V'kama yibareyun. And on this day, how many in the world will be born? And now individualized, particularly mi yichya umi yamut. Who in particular will die, will live, and who will die? Mi bekitso umi lo bekitso. Who at a time a portion for him or her, and who not at that time? Mi b'mayim umi ba'esh. Who by water, a tsunami, drowning, who ba'esh, or God forbid, a fire. Mi b'cherev umi b'chaya. Who in violence by sword, or gunshot, or by animal. Mi b'ra'av umi b'tzama. Who from famine, who from thirst, mi b'rashu mi b'magefa, who in an earthquake, or like these hurricanes that are happening, God forbid, on the southeastern America now, who mi b'magefa, and who by plague, like COVID, mi b'chanika, mi b'askila, who by strangling, who by stoning, like let's say Nasrallah, the building toppled on him when they bombed it. He died with skila, he died stoning, and he also died from fire. There was fire all over the place. He inhaled the fumes, mi ba'esh. And he also was chenek, and he suffocated to death. He was strangled. He got Yom Kippur on steroids. Magia. Mi anuach mi anua. Who will have a year of menucha, peace? Who will be just wandering and unable to find a resting spot. Mi ishaketu mi taref. Who will have quiet and who will just be troubled and in angst all year. Mi shalev umid yasar. Who will have shalva v'betach. Again, who will be satisfied and who will be overwhelmed by isurim, by terrible torments. Mi aniu mi asher. Who will become, God forbid, poor and destitute, who will become wealthy, mi ishafel mi arum, who will fall, who will rise. And this we learned again in much greater detail last class. Let's move on. This prayer, which is a hallmark of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, hence the high holidays, the Yamim Noraim, we open our machzor. How often do we really stop and wonder, I wonder who wrote this prayer? I wonder how they came up with this prayer. Okay, if you're more studied and you're more experienced with this, or you're just a mind that's more curious, but it's an interesting thing. This prayer has a fascinating story. It's found in Sefer Or Zarua, an halachic compendium, sort of like the Shulchan Aruch, a guide of law, but in volume 2, section 2, chapter 276, Chelik Bet, Perek Reish Ayin Vav of Sefer Or Zarua, this is found. The composer of the book, the author, writes, Matzati Michtav Yado, I found a handwritten letter or note, Shel Heresh Harav Ephraim Mibuna Bar Yaakov. I found a Rabbi Ephraim, son of a Yaakov, who had this handwritten note or script or scroll, Shinrei Shurab Amnon Mimagensa, that Rabbi Amnon of Mayence, in Hebrew Yiddish Magensa, Mayence, Germany, Yosad Unetaneh Tokef, is the one who established the prayer Unetaneh Tokef, Unetaneh Tokef, Al Mikre Hara She'era Lo, in the aftermath of an horrific event that befell him. Vav Zayin Lamed V'Zel Shono, and this is what he wrote. That is what Rabbi Ephraim wrote on his note, his scroll. Ma'aseh Rabbi Amnon Mimagensa. A story, it happened with Rabbi Amnon of Mayence, Shehaya Gadol Hador, who was the number one leading rabbinical sage of his time and generation, V'ashir Umiyuchas, and he was wealthy beyond words and incredibly well-connected in family with upper crust family. V'yafei Toar, v'yafei Mareh, and he was pleasant to look at. He had everything going for him, as they would say. V'heichelu hasarim v'hahegmon, and he emerged as the leading Jew of Mayence. And it was a time, as it always seems to be, particularly in Germany, that the Jews were under oppression, persecution. And he was the Jewish community's emissary to in those years, the Holy Roman Empire and everything. Those were the years when the popes and the cardinals and the bishops, more even than kings, were the heads of government. And so the Sarim V'Hagmon, the archbishop and others of his chief officers, were constantly pressuring the great Rabbi Amnon to convert to Catholicism. Levakesh mimenu sheyahafech ledatam, begging him, imploring him to reverse course and accept their religion. Vayama'en l'shmo lahem, and he constantly refused. He would go, he would meet with them. They weren't friends. It's like an ambassador of a hostile country meeting with another ambassador or foreign minister. You're not friends, but you're in proper diplomacy. And they're constantly asking him to convert. Vayehi kedvarim kedabram elav yom yom. And every day they would bring it up, every time he met them. V'lo shamar lahem. And he just would not pay heed to them. Vayefatzer bo hahegmon. And the hegmon, the archbishop, just never let it go. Vayehi kahayom b'hachzikam alav. And one day, the archbishop just got to him. No, of course he didn't convert him. Not Rabbi Amnon. But he just got to him that day. Vayomer chafetz ani lehivaetz. And Rabbi Amnon, instead of saying no, and keep in mind again, he's an envoy. Again, like an ambassador of a hostile foreign country, meeting with his peer, the foreign minister or secretary of state of the country with whom he's meeting. So you have to maintain diplomacy. You can't just stuff something in another guy's face. And so he would always find polite ways to keep the conversations going on the issues that he needed to discuss and to set aside all this side stuff about converting. But as I said, the archbishop got to him one day and he said, Chafetz ani lehivaetz. You know what? Tell you what, let me think about it. V'lachshov al hadavar ad shlosha yamim. Let me think about it for 3 days. Uchadei lidchot tamei alav amar ken. And the reason he said that was just to stop the heckling and just get on with the business at hand. And just, it's like when your kids, ask you, can you do something, and you really don't want to do it, but it's 11 at night, and there should be asleep, and you should be asleep, and you say, let's talk about it tomorrow. And you know that tomorrow you're going to say no, but you'll be strong enough to stand by your no, whereas now you're just too tired for it. So, and he did it just to get them out of his hair. And when those words came out, let me just get my there's no dots. Okay, and when he said that to the Hegmon, to the Archbishop, Rabbi Amnon, it broke Rabbi Amnon's heart when the words came out. Al asher kach yatzami piv lashon safek, that it came out of his mouth as though he had the slightest chance in a gazillion years that he would have a doubt over being Jewish and living Judaism to the fullest, to the end. It troubled him beyond, he couldn't handle it. He was so at pain with himself. And had he committed a chil Hashem, since after all he's the greatest rabbinic scholar and sage of the time, and famous and wealthy and well connected, and he suggested, I need 3 days to think about it. Shehayat tzarich shum eitzah u'machshava lichfor be'elokim chayim, implying, as if to imply that he's going to need to seek counsel and take advice as to whether he should become a kofar, whether he should deny the God, the living God. He came home and he wouldn't eat and he wouldn't drink. And all of his relatives, his nearest associates, those who loved him, his friends, came to console him and get him back on track. And he could not pull himself together. Ki Amar Ered El Nivi Avel Sha'ola. He said he's going to end up just in the grave, mourning and with his heart and his soul, and and he wept and he was so crushed in his heart. He said he'd come back in 3 days. And the third day came, and on this third day he's still filled with pain, aggravation, and the Archbishop, he also had a calendar with the day circled and sent emissaries to Rabbi Amnon. No? Vayomer lo elech. And Rabbi Amnon said, I'm not coming. Vayosef od atzar shaloch sarim rabim v'nichbadim e'ela. And so the bishop sent even higher ranking, more prestigious messengers and envoys to retrieve Rabbi Amnon, to fetch him. And he absolutely refused to go and meet the Archbishop, which you can't do that in that setting in those times. Vayomer hahegmon maharu et Amnon lahavio ba'al korcho. And the Archbishop said, all right, that's it. I want you to grab Amnon and bring him against his will. Vayamaharu vayaviu oto. And the messengers raced, and they brought him against his will. Vayomer lo masot Amnon. Lama lo bata ela lemoed asher ya'adeta li lehiva etz. And the Archbishop said, what's going on, Amnon? Why didn't you show up at the time that you yourself said you would come? You said you're going to take counsel, you're going to think about it, davar. And you said you'll come back with an answer. Which implied to me that you're going to do what I'm asking, namely convert. Vayomar Amnon, and Amnon responded, answered, Ani et mishpati acharotz ki halashon asher diber v'techasev lach dina lechatcha. Rabbi Amnon says, I will pronounce judgment on myself. The tongue that spoke to you these false and fraudulent words, the proper judgment is to cut off that tongue. Because in Rab Amnon's sense, this would be his way of doing Kiddush Hashem, a Kaddish Hashem. Just like martyrs who die during the Crusades, during the Holocaust, martyrs who sooner died with the sword of the Crusaders on their throats rather than agree to convert and save their lives. They died al Kiddush Hashem. In the same way, he felt he would rather die or have them cut out his tongue, having spoken words that could even imply he would leave the faith. Al asher diber kacha, vayan ha'egmon vayomer. And the archbishop responded and said, no, lo, ki halashon lo echtoch, lo achtoch. No, your tongue I will not cut off, because ki hetev dibra, because your tongue, in my opinion, spoke the right words, implying that you're going to convert to Christianity. So your tongue is the most innocent part of your body. Ela haraglayim asher lo ba'ul moed, asher dibarta elai akatzitz. Rather, your legs I will cut off. Your legs that did not fulfill your promise to walk and to greet and to meet me on the third day. So your legs which rebelled against me, I will cut them off. Via yeter hagufi ser. And once they started cutting off his legs, they started persecuting him, torturing him with the rest of his body. And they cut off his fingers and they cut off his toes. And I even feel uncomfortable translating. It doesn't get much worse. So you don't have to turn off the sound. Perik uperik. Hayusho alinlo hatach pelz od amnon lafok leemunato. And they kept asking him after each torture action, well, have you changed your mind yet? You want to stick with your emunah, with your faith? And then would come the next thing and the next thing. Vayomer lo. And he continued saying, no, I will not leave Judaism. And when they were finished cutting off everything, the archbishop, the evil archbishop, said, just take what's left of his torso. He was still alive, together with all his body parts. I won't spell it out item by item, and put it all into the equivalent of a coffin. And they carried that box to his home. And so he was brought to his home in those pieces. And as he got home, let's see where did it go. Okay. And that is why he was given the name all along Rabbi Amnon, because he was one who he'emin, he had emunah. He was willing to give everything for his emunah, his faith. Achi nikra shmo Rabbi Amnon. For that reason, his name was called Rabbi Amnon. He he'emin, the Kelchai, because he believed in the living God. V'saval al emunato yisurin kashin, and he suffered for his faith the most horrible sufferings, may ahava, out of his love of God, rak al hadavar shirat sami piv, merely because of the words of doubt that had emanated from his mouth. Achar hadavarim ha'elu, korav moed, v'yigia reishei Rosh Hashanah. Soon after Rosh Hashanah came, bikesh mikrovav laset oto levet hakneset, he was still alive in the condition I've described, and he asked of his family, obviously he did not have much long to live, and he asked of his family to carry him in that state to the synagogue. Im kol perkei etzba'otav hameluchim ulahashkivo etzel Shinsari Shliach Tzibur. He asked that they place him in the synagogue at the front row alongside the person leading the prayers, what we today would call the chazan of Rosh Hashanah, the Rosh Hashanah chazan. Vayasu Cain, and they brought him and they did his Vayihika Asher Higia Shatz Lomar Kedusha. And as the chazan was repeating the Amidah of Rosh Hashanah and got to the point of Kedusha, V'chayot, and the part where it talks about the sanctification of God and the holy beings in heaven. Asher, Amad Lemet, Aleph Lamed, Amar Le Rabbi Amnon Hamten Ma'at. Rabbi Amnon called out from in that box to the chazan. Obviously, he didn't have a strong voice, and the chazan was right next to him, and he was able to say, "Wait a little, Hamtein Ma'at, wait a little." Ba'akadeshet Hashem Agadol, and I would like to publicly sanctify the great and holy name of God. Vayan b'kol ram uvachen lecha ta'alek dusha, and with the strongest voice, Rabbi Amnon started saying the first words of Kedusha. Klomar shekidashti et shimcha al malchutacha, that I have sanctified your name for your kingship, be'ichudecha, to affirm your oneness, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that we believe in only one God. Vav Aleph Kaf Ba'achar Kach Omar, and immediately afterwards he suddenly started to pronounce a poetic prayer, Unetaneh Tokef Kedusha Yom, and he recited what we now have today as the Unetaneh Tokef prayer. The Omar, Emet ki ata dayanu mochiach, and he said, "Indeed, you are the judge." Kedei lahatzdik alav et adin. He was, in essence, saying he accepts the judgment that God imposed upon him to undergo what he just had befallen him in the recent time. She'alu lefanav otan prikei yadav raglav v'chein kol ha'inyan. And he just recited all of the prayer. Vizkir v'chotam yad kol adam bo. He talked about how every man signs the book. V'tivkod nefesh kol chai, and that God takes account of the soul of every living being. Shekach nigzar alav beis reshei b'Rosh Hashanah. That this was decreed on him a year ago in Rosh Hashanah. He accepts this was his decree. Ucheshagamar kol hasiluk nistalek. And when he finished reciting and he got to the last word, he died. Le'ein kol, and he passed on to the next world before the eyes of everyone in that synagogue. Ve'einenu, and he wasn't there anymore. He disappeared. He went to heaven. Ki lakach oto Elokim, because God had taken him up to heaven. The olav ne'amar, and it just goes on. Achar hadavarim, after all this happened, v'ha'emet asher hu Allah Rav Amnon v'nitakesh mishiva shamala. Basically, 3 days after this all happened, and he went to heaven in near Eb Mar'ot Halayla, the Rabbana Colonimus ben Rabbana Meshulam ben Rabbana Colonimus ben Rabbana Moshe ben Rabbana Colonimus. Rabbi Amnon came in a dream to this Rabbi Colonimus. V'limedlo, the name Colonimus was a somewhat common Jewish name in the Middle Ages. V'limedlo et hapeyutahu. And in the dream, Rabbi Amnon taught Rabbi Colonimus word for word this entire prayer that he had composed impromptu in the synagogue. Unetaneh Tokef Kedusha Yom, the entire prayer, Vayetzav alav lishlochato bechol tefutzot hagolah, and he instructed him in the dream to write down, integrate that prayer, put it in writing, and sent copies to every corner of the Jewish globe, of the exile, Lehiyot lo ed v'zikaron, that it should be a witness and a memory, vayasak gaon ken. And this indeed is what happened.
Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur
This is the world that existed at the time of those archbishops. This was the Middle Ages. Areas of expulsion everywhere we lived. England, 1290, expelled. France, 1306. Germany, the 1100s. We were expelled from Provence in France in 1490, Spain in 1492, Portugal 1497. We were expelled from Sardinia in Italy in 1492, and from Sicily. In the 1300s from Hungary, 1400s from Austria, from Poland as early as 1495, Lithuania 1445, the Crimea 1016. This was that world in which Rabbi Amnon lived, Germany. It was a day of awe, and it centered around the Kohen Gadol, the high Kohen, all in the Beit HaMikdash. He had to get up very, very early in the morning. Actually, he didn't go to sleep. He had to stay up all night. He wasn't allowed to go to sleep so that he would not have a pollution within his body. And they would discuss, they had people sitting with him all night long talking Torah and asking him questions to keep him awake. The floor was like stone, and he'd be barefoot. And if he seemed to be getting a little tired, they'd have him stand on the cold floor, help keep him awake. And in the morning, the services began. There were like 5 changes of clothes. He had white Kohen Gadol garments and gold garments. And for each one, he would have to go into a mikvah, come out, and put on the next change of garments, and then go into a mikvah again when those garments came off, and put on new garment. It went into the mikvah several times during the day. If the water was extremely cold, they came up with a system to add some warm water. They came up with a way on Shabbat, which Yom Kippur is Shabbat of Shabbatot, to make the water more lukewarm. And so he went into the mikveh several times and would change his clothes. The Beit HaMikdash, well, when he went in, there was a curtain separating most of the room, and then a much smaller section of room on the other side of the curtain. Think of any room, think of a theater, how on the curtain, one side is the big amount of space where all the people sit, the audience, and the other side of the curtain is only the stage. So it's a very simplified kind of image. The innermost is called Kodesh HaKodeshim, the Holy of Holies. No one ever was allowed to set foot on that land, except for a Kohen Gadol, and only on Yom Kippur. He also was not allowed to set foot there any other time of the year. No one else, and if they did, they would die instantly. There is a big debate whether it's true. I've read from both sides. There's a debate whether the Kohen Gadol actually went into the Kodesh HaKodeshim, the Holy of Holies, on Yom Kippur with a rope attached to one of his feet, and someone on the outside holding the rope, so that if he would die in there, he could be pulled out without anyone entering. There's another opinion that just says you're not allowed to eat on Yom Kippur. But if someone, God forbid, has no choice and is approved medically and by the rabbi, and so in the same way, there's an opinion that though no one's allowed in there, but if it's to pull out the Kohen Gadol, that would be an exception. And it is for the same reason, by the way, that there's a big debate whether Jews today in 2024 are allowed on the Temple Mount. Forget about Arabs and politics, whether Jews are allowed to walk on the Temple Mount. It depends on the different schools of thought as to whether we know with precision which was the forbidden area. No one's allowed on the forbidden area. And so the great majority of Orthodox rabbis hold that we're not 1,000,000% sure of the exact location, therefore people should not go. But there are many of the more Zion, not that the others are not Zionist, many of them are quite Zionist also. But among the nationalist Zionist rabbinic community, there also are great rabbis who feel they know the exact spots that are forbidden, and those are roped off that Jews can't set foot there. And it's a debate that goes back and forth. If you can have Jewish tourists on the Temple Mount and they're wearing shorts and they're joking and they're taking pictures, is that suitable for the Temple Mount? So that's another story. The Kohen Gadol would do most of his service not in the Kodesh HaKodeshim, but he would go into the Kodesh HaKodeshim, the Holy of Holies, for example, to to light the Torah, the incense, that would provide the particular fragrance, and it would create a smoke that would fill the entire inner chamber. And outside that curtain, there was an altar, and there were different steps and places and where he was supposed to go for each. And it's all discussed, I believe, in chapter 8, Perachet of Mishneh Yoma, the tractate Yoma. It's called Yoma, Yud Vav Mem Aleph, Yoma, laws and everything of the Yom Kippur service. Of the 10 chapters of the Mishnah Yoma, only one chapter deals with things like fasting and wearing leather shoes, and 9 of the chapters basically are about the sacrifices and the temple service, the Avodah. And so it uses a certain terminology throughout. He would do this, and then he would return to where he had been, and he would go to where he had been, and to the place where he stood. And then he goes and does the next thing, and then he returns to the place where he was, and he enters the place where he was, and it's a terminology, an expression that recurs throughout that chapter. And he offers, when he sacrifices the animal, he sprinkles its blood on the altar a designated amount of times. And we talked about this briefly on Sunday as well. God willing, on Thursday night, we'll see it all. I'll figure it out. And he had to be careful. I'm sure you've been in that situation in your life, not as Kohen Gadol in the Beit HaMikdash, but where you're supposed to take, I don't know, like 3 teaspoons of cough medicine. Well, let's say. And it's like, I don't remember, did I take it? Did I take 3 spoons? We're supposed to take 3 tablets. Okay? God forbid you should have a lung transplant. God forbid. But like I'm supposed to have 3 tacrolimus and twice a day. And it's like, did I take 3? Did I take 2? And so that's Denise's job. If anything happens to me, you know who to blame. She's amazing. She's amazing. So anyway, you got to be careful. And like, frankly, when I take the tacrolimus or tacrolimi, that's 1, that's 2, that's 3. When I was as a rabbi doing a wedding, you know that thing about how the bride walks around the groom 7 times? I actually, in a very soft undertone, it's part of the service. It's included with the honorarium. As the woman's walking around, they go, that's 1. That's 2. That's 3. Because otherwise, for all she knows, she'll be doing it all afternoon and pass out. The Kohen was supposed to out loud call when he sprinkled the blood. Echad, achat, achat. Okay, that's 1. Achat v'achat. That's 1 and 1. Achat u'shtayim. Achat v'shalosh. 1 and 3. That's achat v'arba. And he would count that way. Ishai Ribo, who we don't have time to talk about, and we've talked about him so often. He's beyond fabulous. He's just a gift from God. Wrote this about 6 years ago, composed it. He calls it the Avodah. It's based on it. It's not an accurate, it's poetic. And what he does is he takes all the main expressions that I've talked about, and he applies them to the theme of Yom Kippur. But you know how songs go. You got to get them done in 3 to 4 minutes. You can't have a song that goes on for 30 minutes unless it's what, MacArthur Park or whatever it was. And so what you have to do is, so he talks about, and the Kohen would stand before God, and he would start to confess his sins, which it does say in the Mishnah. And then he combines the two. He would start to remember his sins. That's 1. That's 1 and 1. It's another sin. He's remembering another sin, 1 and 3, 1 and 4. And he would just be brokenhearted, realizing all the wasted moments in his year and all the lost opportunities and how much of his life had gone down the drain. And he would prostrate himself, which is from the text. And the whole nation would hear him say, Baruch Kavod, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchut Olion V'ed, blessed is the holy name of God forever, after reciting a verse. And this is what's going on in shul. When everybody starts to hit the floor and prostrate a few times, 3 times during the repetition of the Amidah in the Ashkenazic Musaf repetition. The Kohen would come out and he would recite a pasuk, a verse from the Torah, a specific verse in which the holy name of God appears. And the one and only time all year that he would actually pronounce the holy name of God in the way the holy name of God is pronounced, that no one ever, ever, ever is allowed to say. And even he could do it only those times when he was reciting it. And when the nation, the thousands, tens of thousands, millions would hear that name that you're not allowed to hear, you're not allowed to say it, everybody would hit the ground in prostrating, in awe, AWE, saying, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchut Olam Va'ed. Blessed is his holy name forever. And then Rebo, in the last part of his, second part of his 3 parts, now has the Kohen, again, 1 and 1, 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1 and 4, because it happens a few times in the Mishnah, but this time Rebo puts it together. The Kohen now comes before God and starts to thank God that despite all the sins, all the wonders and miracles and kindnesses that God did in the previous year, that we did not deserve. And he would count all these wonders and miracles, 1, and it was 1 and 1, 1 and 2, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000, tens of thousands, thanking God for all the kindness. And he would recite the verse and the prayer and the song, and everybody would prostrate. And then again, Rebo, finally, last part of the song, what actually happens is the Kohen Gadol keeps going into the mikveh, changing clothes, the white to the gold to the white to the gold. And after Yom Kippur, he goes home. But Rebo puts it all together in the song to get it all done in 4 minutes, 5 minutes. At the end of all the service, without spelling out that this is after Yom Kippur, and the Kohen Gadol would go home, accompanied by a huge mob, a huge entourage, and he would celebrate and he would eat. Of course, it's after Yom Kippur. And he would celebrate, eat. Everybody would just be thrilled that the nation has been forgiven its sins. And our Thursday night classes learned with me how the Gemara actually says that Yom Kippur is one of the 2 happiest days in the Jewish calendar because it is the day we're forgiven our sins. And then the song ends with another part of the Musaf repetition, and it's from the Gemara, Mar'e Kohen. How sad the Machzor, the repetition says, it's actually sad to hear what used to happen at the Beit HaMikdash 2,000 years ago, because we don't get to see it or experience it. And if only we could see the Kohen Gadol in his glory on Yom Kippur. We can't describe it in words in a machzor. Only to see the Mar'e Kohen, the appearance of the Kohen that day, it's like a rainbow in the sky in a cloudy sky. It's like a canopy over the heavens, and it describes. That's how the song ends. So I was going to do the whole Avodah, part of it tonight, part of it next third, and then close with Rebo. So we'll do the Rebo now, and Thursday's class will be the presentation. So we're just going to conclude now with an English translation, of course. And even if you've heard it with Yom Kippur around the corner, it's good to hear.
נכנס למקום שנכנס ועמד במקום שעמד רחץ ידיו רגליו טבל עליו ונסתפק בא ממקום שהוא בא והלך למקום שהלך פשט בגדי החול לבש בגדי לבן וכך היה אומר אנא השם כפר לחטאים לעוונות ולפשעים שחטאתי לפניך אני וביתי ואם אדם היה יכול לזכור את הפגמים, את החסרונות, את כל הפשעים, את כל העוונות, בטח כך היה מונה אחת, אחת ואחת, אחת ושתיים, אחת ושלוש, אחת וארבע, אחת וחמש. ישר היה מתייאש, כי לא יכול היה לשאת את המרירות אחת, את הבושה, את הפספוס, את ההפסד. והכהנים והעם העומדים בעזרה, כשהיו שומעים את שם השם המפורש יוצא מפי כהן גדול, היו קוראים, משתחווים ונופלים על פניהם. ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד. פסע למקום שפסע, פניו לקודש אחוריו להיכל, ללא רבב היו שווים פיו ומעשיו. בא ממקום שהוא בא והלך למקום שהלך, פשט בגדי לבן, לבש בגדי זהב, וכך היה אומר אנא השם, כפר לחטאים, לעוונות ולפשעים, שחטאתי לפניך אני וביתי. ואם אדם היה יכול לזכור את החסדים, את הטובות, את כל הרחמים, את כל הישועות, בטח כך היה מונה אחת, אחת ואחת, אחת ושתיים, אחת מאלף, אלפי אלפים ורוב ריבי רבבות, ניסים נפלאות שעשית עמנו ימים ולילות. והכהנים והעם העומדים בעזרה, כשהיו שומעים את שם השם המפורש יוצא מפי כהן גדול, היו קוראים, משתחווים ונופלים על פניהם. ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד. ממקום שיצא ורעד במקום שעמד, פשט בגדי זהב, לבש בגדי עצמו, וכל העם והכהנים היו מלווים אותו לביתו, ויום טוב לאוהביו, כי נסלח לכל עדת ישראל. אשרי העם שככה לו, אשרי העם שהשם אלוקיו, אשרי העם שככה לו, אשרי העם שהשם אלוקיו, אשרי העם כאוהל הנמתח בדרם על המראה שואל, כברקים היוצאים מזיו החיות מראה שואל, דמות הקשת בתוך הענן מראה כהן, כחסד הניתן על פני חתן מראה כהן. וכהנים והעם העומדים בעזרה, כשהיו שומעים את שם השם המפורש יוצא מפי כהן גדול, היו קוראים, משתחווים ונופלים על פניהם. ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד.
Forward to seeing you. May God bless you with a happy, healthy, wonderful new year. a meaningful fast. And may this be just a great year that we really can always talk about the great year 5785. And already starting nicely, I'm going to be able to post the class after all. Bye-bye.